And welcome to the Midday Show. See, you see what I see now. You have to wait for it, don't you?
I do.
You don't know. So you thought I was just being funny, but that's how it really works.
You're rarely funny.
That's how it really works. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. We have the names right today. Welcome to the Midday Show. We are going to talk about dead naming today, names at graduation, some different things. I'm excited to talk to you about this. I think it will be a good conversation. I think we disagree on the topic, which is always
I think we always have good conversations, but yeah, it is part of the brave new world that we're in, and these are topics that to some people they don't mean anything, and to other people they mean a lot. So it's it is part of life in 2023.
Buckle in.
All I wanna do is feel awesome. All I wanna do is feel awesome. All I wanna do is feel awesome.
Get to the dead naming. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. By the way, I had people tell me that you had never looked as good as you looked yesterday with my name right there.
Above it.
Yeah, how come when I point it doesn't?
Well, it's opposite. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that yesterday, it's Mark's name was here and your face was here.
What's funny is you're pointing at me, but because it was the sign, you didn't.
Yeah, that's hard. I always used to laugh at the dude with the telestrator on TV because, like, remember when Mike Fratello was the czar of the telestrator, and John Madden used to do it, and sometimes it was all over the place.
You've never sounded older than you do right now.
Yeah.
Telestrator. Ask me how many times I've used a telestrator.
Well, I've never used one either, but that's what they called it. What do they call it?
Oh, I'm sure they called it something. I'm sure it was called a telestrator.
Mike Fratello was the czar of the telestrator. You never heard that?
I know
who Mike Fratello.
Oh, I know who Mike Fratello is, but I've never heard him called the czar of the telestrator.
Yeah, absolutely. Ask any old basketball fan, and that's who he was.
Telestrator. I don't have one of those. Other than that, things are good. Life's good. I asked you how Vassar was. Things are good.
I guess Vassar's good. I mean, I'm not. I assume.
Okay.
I assume they filmed. There was. You might have watched a show. They filmed some HBO show there in the past. Sex Lives of College Kids or something like that. Do you know
that was at Vassar?
They filmed it at Vassar.
Huh. I did not know
And
that.
I don't know if they're making a new season or they're not filming it there or whatever. But yeah, they because I've never seen the show, but it is kind of the
That is interesting. I did not know that it was Vassar. Area students challenge use of dead names at graduation. Our own Ashley Little, our content manager here, did this story. I actually sent her a message because I wanted to let her know that I thought she did a really nice job with it. Because not the easiest.
Does that imply that the other stories you don't think she did a really nice job?
I think she does. I think she does a nice job on all of them. This time I told her she did a really nice job.
No, I'll tell you, that is, as I was joking, but it is a stupid thing about compliments. It's kind of like when you tell someone they look nice, and you're like, "What are you saying that the other days I don't?" It is a double-edged sword.
It's a little bit like the Whiplash, where the two worst words in the English language are good and job. Do you remember that in Whiplash? No. You know the drumming movie? Yeah.
I just watched it again. Not the two worst words are good job.
I think it's the two most dangerous words in the English language are good and job.
I tell you, that movie. Well, and I know it's not what we're talking about. I don't think it was even that long. I think it was like an hour and a half.
I don't know.
I think it was a shorter movie.
Okay.
It was 90 minutes of tension.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
There were very few like take a deep breath and let's regroup and let's have halftime and like it was.
Well, let's save it for the end because that'll be something to lighten up the end a little bit. Because you said you just rewatched it, right?
I probably within the last month. I'll bet I watched.
Save it for the end. We'll come back to it because that's a good one to lighten up the mood a little bit.
Nothing lightens up the mood like Whiplash.
Area students challenge use of dead names at graduation. Several Williamsport area high school students have spoken out against a school district policy requiring the use of legal names at graduation ceremonies, a policy that restricts the use of preferred names of trans and gender nonconforming students. Several students are requesting that the school administration change the naming rule for graduation day and avoid the public outing of their dead name, a term popularized by the trans community to refer to given names that individuals no longer identify with. The reason we're using this story, obviously, like I said, I think Ashley did a great job with it. You can check it out at NorthcentralPa.com. It's not so much about the specific school or the specific students. I'm really fascinated by, and you and I talked about it a little bit, the whole concept of dead naming, kids under the 18, basically what are you allowed to do and what are you not allowed to do? Because obviously there is a legality to your name. So you and I kind of dived into the whole aspect of it. So I don't know what branch we want to go off into first. I'll start with this just because it's kind of lighthearted. I respect somebody wanting something and them fighting to get their way. I wake up every day and hope that I get the things that I want. So this is a weird, right? I'm being like serious. You know what I mean? Like I'm being funny, but I'm also being serious. I mean, I think waking up every day and hoping you get the things you want is, I don't know if there's anything more American than that. Is there anything more American than waking up in the morning? So this is a weird topic for me because on one hand, I support the idea of them getting to use the name they want to use, because if I were in the same boat, I would want them to use the name that I wanted. I would want them to use the name that I'm referred to every day. So on one hand, I'm kind of like, yeah, I hope they get what they want. Like I'm hoping that they do get the name they want announced at the ceremony. 50% of me also, I just don't know how big of a deal it is. It's a legal name. It's a tradition. It's what people have been announced as. Most high schools. I know some high schools do the college, write it on the card, use the name. So I'm in this 50-50 line of kind of like, I'm for fighting for the things you want. I hope they got what they wanted. I hope that their name, anybody in the country who had a name they wanted announced, I hope they got it. On the other side, I don't know if it's something a school should have to do. And so I'm kind of on that fence. And I have found, depending on who I talk to, not very many people are on the fence. They are either on the first thing I said or they are on the second thing I said.
Well, and just as an example, just so everyone knows, I think they understand, like Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner would be her dead name. Elliot Page, that used to be.
Elliot would be the dead name. Or I'm sorry, no, Ellen would be the.
Ellen would be the Ellen. I couldn't even think of the dead name. So,
can I ask you that first to start?
Sure.
Do you think dead name is a proper term?
It is interesting, and one of the things that I would, if Elliot Page or Caitlyn Jenner was here and we got to interview them, which I would think is fascinating. Like, I would ask Caitlyn Jenner who won the Olympic decathlon in 1976.
Okay.
Did Caitlyn Jenner win it, or did Bruce Jenner win it? And is it like, is it? Because I get the so anyway, and I think their side of it, and not to speak for them because I don't know, was that Bruce kind of felt like he was always Caitlyn trapped in a man's body. And I think that would be the argument. But I think it's an interesting discussion. As far as when I graduated high school, and I don't know how everyone else's was, that's how ours was. They gave you a sheet. You could write it down, because we had kids that, the typical things. Do you want your middle initial announced or do you not?
Right.
Are you the third or the fourth or a junior? And do you want that read or do you not? And so those things, like, they just passed it. We wrote it on the sheet how we wanted our name read, and it was over. So I don't understand, from my aspect, I don't understand why that's a big deal.
So just to backtrack, dead naming.
Mm-hmm.
The term dead name to me, it's not that I disagree with the term. The term isn't a big deal to me. Like, it doesn't influence whether or not I agree with whether or not they should get their names. But to call it a dead name, technically it's not dead, because on almost every legal document under the age of 18, the majority of the time it's still showing that name. So there is, to call it a dead name, almost, it's kind of like pronouncing something's over before technically it is in fact over.
Well, right.
And I know I'm kind of like nitpicking there and diving into it maybe a little too much, but I did dead naming from a marketing standpoint. If you are somebody that wants to hear your new name announced, dead naming is like the greatest thing you could call it, because you're basically saying, like, it's done, it's over with, that thing doesn't even matter or exist anymore. And all I'm saying is, like, from a legality side, that term isn't fully true.
And where
Like,
it
it's-
becomes interesting in high school is some of these kids, when you're graduating, some of the kids are 18, but some of the kids aren't, or they haven't had the ability to go through and legally change
Right.
their name if he or she wants to,
Right.
is planning on it. And I guess the aspect from the school, and part of the article, if you haven't read the article yet, is the kids, they understand on the legal document, on their diploma,
Right.
it is going to say their legal name. They can't have, their quote unquote, I don't even know how to say it.
I just keep saying new name.
I was going to say new name, or it's so they acknowledge that and they understand that and they know on their driver's license it's going to, but when they come to graduation, which is purely ceremonial, and it is, if it's their achievement, and I know as a parent, when I went through it, I kind of felt like, it's a big moment for me too, but it is the kid's achievement. So on the kid's achievement, if the kid wants their name, whatever name they want read, I don't understand what the big deal is. I'm sure the school is a little bit afraid that it would go to crazy nicknames, or kids that would want, something read just to be outlandish and absurd, because teenagers have a tendency to do that.
Sure.
But when you're in a school system and you've been with these kids all day, for years and years and years, what they go by. And if there is a kid or multiple kids in this case, that have gone by, such and such a name for, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, and this is really what they're known by, then what is the harm in just reading that name? Like, who is going to be upset if they read the new name and ignore the dead name? That's my question.
I don't disagree with you from the sense of harm. Like, it always comes down to, like, who are you catering is a bad word, but I'm going to use it. Who are you catering to? Who are you not catering to? Who are you going to make the adjustment for? Who are you not going to make the adjustment for? And so I fully agree with your idea of, like, it's not harming anybody. It's part of the reason why I said, like, I hope they get what they want. Because in my mind, it's not really harming anyone. So who am I to say, like, I'm not hoping they get it? I guess my stance, and you and I talked about this a little bit, I wouldn't fall back on a school or any school that considers it reasonably. And then if they decide we are going to stick with tradition, we are going to announce the legal name, for me, like, it's kind of the same thing. I don't see the harm in it. So it's like this weird thing. Like, I don't think it's like this terribly detrimental thing to say, like, it's not like they haven't been doing that way for a very, very long time. It's not like they're poking fun at the legal name.
Mhm.
It's the legal name that's on the document. It's on the diploma. They're going to say it out loud. So what's funny is in a weird way, we are coming to the same conclusion, just from different angles. Like, to me, it doesn't harm anybody to uphold the tradition. And again, I say that with the understanding that I hope they get what they want.
I would say, so let's look at it this way. Say, when you deal with divorce, there are some women, women and men get divorced, but there are some, after divorce, there are times that the women stay with the name they had when they were married, because of either the kids have that last name, or they had been this person for, they've been like, that's been my name for the last 23 years.
Mhm.
I'm not changing it now.
Sure.
Just because. But there are also women who, because of either the reason the marriage ended or the way they were treated during the marriage or whatever, that as soon as they get divorced, they go back to their maiden name, because they do not want to acknowledge this anymore. It was a bad experience. It was a bad example, or it was a bad time in their life. And they don't want to carry it with them any
Sure.
longer. And in either case, I can see why it would be either one. Depending on the circumstances. So depending on why, in some of these kids, you can imagine with a biological last name where maybe dad was abusive, or you have biological, or maybe dad wasn't in the picture, and the kid was raised by stepdad since the kid was 3. And when they get to graduation, that because it's ceremonial,
Sure.
that they want to have it acknowledged, or they don't want to bring something traumatic, or they want to acknowledge, because that's why a lot of people
Right.
hyphenate their last name.
So I agree with your hypothetical. It's so, because I feel like there's 1,000 examples we can both give. In a conversation I had with a friend, I said, would it change your opinion if that person then changed their name again 6 months from now? Like, to go through the hassle of announcing a name that has been selected in 6 months, 18 months, 3 years, whatever the time scale is, does it then change anything if they decide that they're going to go by a different name
like
after graduation?
like Sean Combs or Puffy Combs or P Diddy or Diddy.
But do you understand what I'm?
No, I get
it
what you're saying.
It's such a weird conversation for me, because I fully understand somebody fighting for something they want, but to make other people recognize it when you then have the freedom to on a whim change it again, like, it's just you know what I mean? Like, you got to kind of walk me there, because I'm not there yet.
But I don't.
Like, I can't.
I don't think in life you can do, like, especially if someone's gone by such and such a name, you don't say, well, I'm not going to go by that, because in 6 months you could change your name. Well, in 6 months we can change everything.
But that's
so.
But that's.
But
do you see what you understand? I'm just. Because I agree, there are going to be circumstances. I think the example I gave you was very similar. I said, like, listen, I get it. Like, if somebody's guardian or parent went to jail when they were younger, and they don't want to be recognized because they have the same first name, they're like a junior, so they always went by a nickname. And that, like, there are instances where I fully get it. And even this is one of those instances where I'm kind of like, listen, go for it. Like, fight the good fight. I understand. I just I wouldn't condemn the organization because they decided to kind of stand by a tradition that technically isn't harming. It's not harming anybody to stand by the tradition.
If there is trauma with it, if there's trauma to the point that so much that the kid doesn't go by that name, doesn't acknowledge that name, then you could be harming that person. And the ceremony is for that person.
We said that there are examples where we understand that.
Right.
Like, there are examples where I understand somebody going by a different name and they would want to fight for it, which, again, I understand. Every kid's situation is going to be different. So I think my point is just kind of to pick and choose those. You're kind of opening up. I don't want to say like it's murky. It's not even murky waters. You're, as an organization, you're just deciding, are we going to consider every case that comes forward, or aren't we? And I'm not to the point yet where I would condemn an organization that's saying we're not going to open that up yet. Like, we're not.
How hard is it? How
you
hard?
Think so?
How many? It's not like there's going to be hundreds. There's a couple. So just like, so let's go another example. And this is more generic. And my son has a friend who is a junior, which I didn't know any of this till a week ago. And he goes by his middle name because in the house they didn't want, two of the same names. So they said to me the other day, Jack's his middle name, right? And I was like, what's his first name? And they said, whatever his first name. And I had no idea. And I've known this kid for years, they're 60. So like, when you come to graduation, if there are those kids who have gone by their middle name or whatever, and if you announce their first name, the people are like, well, who is that? So does that matter? Is that big of a difference when we're like, well, I don't, I know I dated a girl whose dad went by his middle name because he hated his first name. And so when we get to it, and in his world, that's who he is.
But I guess what I'm saying is I would make the same exact art. Like, to me, it doesn't change. Whether or not the person is non-binary or trans doesn't change my argument. Like, I think sometimes we look at this as like it's condemning that community, and that's not really it's not even a dispute. That's not even really the point that I would try to make. It's just that I wouldn't throw a school under the bus for saying, like, we're going to read the name that's on the diploma.
Here's
another thing, because I agree with you. I agree. I know you would. That's why we disagree. That's why we disagree. I know. Here's an example. So throughout, let's say someone decides that they want to be called by a nickname or a new name or whatever the case may be. And let's say from the age of 16 to 18 to graduate. So for 2 years, they're called by this name within the school. Teachers refer to them as it. Administrators refer to all of that. Okay. the school basically obliged them
Mhm.
for the majority of their school career.
Mhm.
And so,
So why not do it one more time?
but I don't disagree with that sentiment. What's funny is you refuse to see the
Well,
other
you won't
side of
take
it.
us- I don't see
You
the other.
you refuse to see. Hold on. You refuse to see the other side of it, which is somebody did something they didn't legally have to do for 2 years. The school does not hold any legality to having to call the person by the thing they want to be called by. Most schools and teachers do it because they want to be nice to the student. So the irony that this organization, this school district, did something to behoove the student 95, 97, 99% of the time. And then this one time they're saying, hey, here's a tradition. We usually announce the name that is on the diploma. Like, for this 1% of the time, could you throw us a bone since we've clearly obliged by calling you the name you wanted to? So, and listen, I know that's not every instance. Do you understand? Like,
No,
I get it, but do you understand what I'm
But
saying?
I don't
Like,
think that's.
it's funny that an organization that has no legal bounding to having to call somebody under the 18 by the name they choose to do it for the student. But then when it comes time to now, like, have it on a diploma and hold up a tradition, now it's almost like, well, I can't believe you're not letting me do this. I'm just saying there is a little bit of like a two-sidedness to it.
In life, you
Mm-hmm.
basically call people by what they want to be called. I don't think any school is making any great like human rights stance by calling someone what they want to be called by. Like my son's name is James because his name is James. We've called him Jimmy since he was born.
Sure.
In every class and if he went into a class and the teacher's like, first day of school, hi, Messina, James, yeah, call me Jimmy. And he's like, I'm not. On the roster, it says James, I will call you James. I don't look at that teacher and say, he's obviously not out of line because that's his proper name, but he's being an idiot because everybody else in the world calls him Jimmy, so just call him Jimmy.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, yes, I'm saying most teachers do that
but not just
because
teachers. We do it in life. We do it at work. We do it with friends. We do it everywhere. It's
yes,
common decency.
Correct. People they're doing it out of like a favor. It's decency. It's nice. What I'm saying
Nice.
is correct. So what I'm saying is like there isn't necessarily a tradition. There isn't necessarily something of showing up every day to your workplace, to your school, whatever it may be. And like, it's not like every day we stand up and like announce your name for an award. Like it's not a thing. So all I'm saying is like, I just find it ironic that there's a lot of people that look at this, and I can agree that there's no harm. I can agree that it's simple to do. What's ironic to me is that nobody refuses to flip it around and just simply say, listen, like they clearly did what the student preferred for 2 years. They didn't have to do that, but they did it. And now when it comes time to do this tradition that we've done for a long time, that's why I said I wouldn't condemn them. Like I'm not going to condemn an organization that does that.
Okay, so by going by the new name, you're saying it's doing no harm. But by reading the old name, I am sure, and just we'll take this back to real life that everyone can relate to, away from the trans, away from the non-binary. I am sure that there are divorced women who would feel harmed if they had to go by their ex-husband's last name.
Sure.
So I can see on the other side, by reading a name that they do not want to be read, or to go by a name that they don't want to go by, I could see why they're harmed. So if there's no harm on the one side and there's possible harm on the other side, then just go with the one that doesn't harm.
That's fine. I mean, do you think that out of the majority of the students across the country that would claim they have a dead name but are not 18 yet, how many of them do you think are harmed by saying the dead name?
That's a fair question. I don't know.
I would guess it's not very high.
I would
imagine that it's just more about the personal choice and trying to figure out who you are. And so it doesn't actually try to harm somebody by saying their legal name under the age of 18. Now you and I can come up with hypotheticals, which we've done. Like we've talked about the outliers and the hypotheticals and how it could change something.
And this is because you're in a school system and because you've dealt with these kids for 180 days for multiple, like the kids, and there's probably a handful. At a big school like Williamsport, there might have been however many. Sure. At a smaller school like a Muncie, a Mount Carmel, there may be one or two. So you know the story. The school should know the story. They should know the kid. They should know whether how much this matters to the kid, and what the reasoning for it is.
Right.
And
Right.
I think you could on a case. I think the schools are small enough. If you're at Penn State University, where there's
But that's different because they're over 18.
it's different.
Like you can,
That is
like
true.
that's different.
That is
That's
true.
what I mean.
But
That's
at these
part
small
of,
schools, you should be able to do it on a case by case basis.
but that's part of the reason what makes this conversation so interesting is the majority of the people that are claiming they don't want the use of their dead name are under the age of 18, which kind of throws a little bit of a wrench.
Or
into
they
this
were
from a
close
legality
enough
side.
that they haven't been able to
Correct.
go through the process.
This is the wild part about it. After talking with friends and my girlfriend, I think the solution is the college style of giving out the card. You say, write down the name that you would like. And then essentially what a secretary or somebody could do is figure, here's the stack that didn't match with the diploma. And then, I mean, if you have to go on a case by case basis, you to ask them why. I mean, I have no issue with that at all. But again, like I'm not to the point yet. I'm not there where I don't think I'm going to judge an administration based off of their understanding of dead names, based off of how they're going to handle dead names. Like, I just don't think, first of all, I don't think like the actual structure of public school is there yet. It just isn't. I guarantee you most public schools that are dealing with dead naming, their administrators had no idea that A, it was going to be a thing, and B, that it was ever going to be something that could cause what's the word I'm looking for? Not a chaos, not like an out riot, but like that it could cause an issue.
No, and I agree with that. But let's just just a bad example of when you're coaching. If you have a kid whose name is whatever, and he says, call me this, what's your answer? Okay. And it's over. And he's happy, and you don't care one way or the other. You just want him to play. So that's the way I see it. A kid's like, call me this.
But in other points of that kid's life, like whether it's going to the DMV when they're 16, any other time they would have to use their legal name, there's going to be moments where, regardless of what we as friends or mentors or whatever we are to that kid, there's going to be moments where they are going to have to use their legal name. It just is what it is. And so I think the question is like, should graduation be one of those things? And I'm not here to say 100% yes. What I'm saying is that I still don't look down upon the school that would say we are going to uphold graduation as one of those things.
Well, okay, that would be my argument. How about this? And I just came up with this off the top of my head. I'm really proud of myself.
Okay.
How about foreign kids?
Okay.
I worked at a company in Baltimore, and the founder of the company was Chinese.
Okay.
And we were the United Colors of Benetton. We had a Vietnamese guy. We had a Korean kid. We had an English guy from the UK. We had a black guy from the United States. We had everybody. And the Asian people had
well, no, that's right. You don't have to go like that.
Yeah,
the
Asian people.
Yes.
One we called Roland. One was John. One was Doug, and they all took American names, but they weren't there on their paychecks. It had their
legal name.
Their legal name. So say that happens at an American high school, and you've got some kid with a Asian name, and he goes by Joe, and everyone at school calls him Joe because they can't pronounce his regular name. His last name could be Lee. It could be, depending on what your nationality is. But so when he gets to graduation, do we have to read his legal name? Or since he's gone by Joe his whole life, can't we just call him Joe? And that happens more often. It's not dead, but it's just been Americanized because for pronunciation purposes and it also, it helps the kid, psychologically blend in, because every time he says his name, it doesn't stand out like my name is an American, and he can pick an American name. And so I'm sure that happens all the time in college, at high school graduations.
Yeah. That's why I said, I think the solution, like if you and I were running a school, I think I would be coming to you and I think I'd be saying, hey, let's do the card. Let's have somebody go through and match up which ones match with the diploma and which ones don't. And then the ones that don't, leading up to graduation, we need to sit down and just make sure, like, why are you doing this? Because again, like you said, you don't want somebody it's first of all, it's graduation. No, it's really the older you get, the less it matters.
Amen.
However, it is a coming of age thing.
Yes.
So you don't want, as much as I'm for them getting the name they want, I'm also for somebody not mocking the process by getting the name they want.
And I don't think they would.
So I think
you would
you
have to go by
check.
so
Well,
it's
that's
not.
right.
It's not.
You'd
More,
have to go by a case-by-case basis
Yes.
of what was coming in. But the only way you know that is by reaching out and finding out. Like if a school's not allowing students to write it down, but see, even then, like call me like maybe I'm getting old. I am. I still go back to the idea of like you're still doing that out of kindness. Like there's no obligation of the school.
It's not
to go out and do that.
If someone walks up to you and you're like, "Hey, my name is Steven," and he says, "Just call me Steve." You're not being that kind by calling him Steve. It's not like you should win an award. He wants to be called Steve, so just call him Steve.
What's the worst nickname you had in high school or college?
Oh, I don't know.
What's the worst? Did you have a worst?
Did I have one? I never really had a nickname that was
okay. So, for example, in high school and college, I had friends that called me Dahmer because Jeffrey Dahmer. It just kind of right. It just kind of stuck. So
that's awesome.
So it's one of those things like if I'm trying to think how to say it. If I can be called Dahmer walking around in high school and college, I just don't. The idea that the majority of people cannot stomach their dead name for a presentation, for a graduation, or whatever. That's why I said I think the cases in which
that was done in good fun.
I think the cases that are done. That's not the point I'm making to you. The point I'm making to you is it really comes down to like, are you okay with it or are you not? Because I very easily could have made a fuss about the fact that I was being called that.
No, you couldn't because you were littler than the guys who were calling you that, and you couldn't do it.
This is what you do when someone tries to make a point that's better than yours. This is what you try to do. So it is. This is what you do. So
let's use a different example. Green jeans.
Green jeans. I love green jeans. So it all comes down to like, are you offended by it or not? Essentially, is what it really, because you and I agree. The hypotheticals that you and I came up with are going to be few and far between, like parents in jail. Not wanting to be known by that family, like those kind of cases are not going to be the regular across the country. They're not.
But I think for people who don't want to have their name read, because I think to take a guy like you, who you went by Jeff and you were always Jeff, but to have your name and official to be like Jeffrey is not a big deal to you because it's your name. When my son is at a thing and they call him James, it's not a big deal to him because that's his name. So I think for people who it is a big deal, there's a reason. And I don't think it's a whim.
I agree with you that it is not a whim, but it comes back to the idea of like, I brought this up too. I know they don't have a choice of what name goes on the diploma. I understand that, but it is, if you can wrap your head around the fact that it has to be on the diploma, I can't imagine that it's a stretch to wrap your head around the fact that it's going to be said out loud when you receive it. Like, I just don't think that's a stretch.
Because, here,
you do think that's a stretch.
No, I don't. But I think it's unnecessary because no one sees your diploma. No one's gonna, but they're going to hear your name announced. That's a topic
for another. Like, diplomas are the biggest waste of money. Go ahead.
Agreed.
Thank you.
No one, it is one thing to be handed a thing in a folder that no one's going to see.
Correct.
It's another thing to have your name announced throughout the gymnasium or the football field or wherever they are, and to have people say, "Oh, and that's who it is."
But I think the circumstances that you and I would agree on, where like it matters, where like it clearly is harmful, I think are fewer and farther between. That's the point that I'm making to you, because that's the word you kind of kept bringing up. Like it doesn't harm anybody, or it is harming somebody.
My daughter chimed in.
There you go, Laney's in. Real quick, Spring. I've called my husband by his nickname since we got together in high school, and still do. When we got married, they used his legal name throughout the ceremony, and it honestly felt weird. It didn't feel like his name to me. I never thought about weddings, like the legality of weddings. When you get a wedding invitation, it is like your legal full name.
Well, that is purely by choice. You don't have to.
That's
the preacher
true.
Can say whatever on the marriage certificate at the courthouse. It has to say the name.
But what they say.
But everything else, like when Slash gets married, they're not going to call him Soul. Whatever, is Slash married? I don't know. But his real first
I'm
name's Saul.
not sure.
What did my daughter say? Was it
When
something-
people call me Lonnie or Lenny,
Lanny.
I correct them. I'm not offended by a mispronunciation, but it feels fundamentally wrong to who I am as a person. I don't know. See, her name, because of her name, it could be different. I've never been offended by somebody who has called me by an incorrect name.
Well, your name's Jeff. It's hard to mess that up.
But wait, you've never been like called the wrong name?
I've been called Mike 10,000 times, but they pronounce it
Does
right.
it offend you?
No, because I'm just used to, and I think every little brother goes through it. When you grow up in a small town, you have the same teachers, and like the teacher, till like October, they
Yeah.
would call it, especially in elementary
think
school. But I'll tell you
Laney-
one of the funny things about
Well-
this, and Lainey might not even remember this. I had my grandmother, so her great grandmother,
Uh-huh.
God rest her soul, called her Lanny all the time.
So wait,
and we're like,
what is
her name, it's Laney.
Laney?
And she called her Lanny. And we're like, everyone else calls her Laney. How can you not hear this? But like in the group, and my grandmother did it until the day she died. She called her Lanny. And we just
Yeah.
didn't,
I
we
think
couldn't, I didn't get it.
Laney brings up a good point, though. We're fundamentally wrong to who I am as a person. Like maybe it's different for me. Like I've never attached who I am to my name. Like I've never thought I was better or worse because of my name, my family's name, like whatever that may be. I've never attached a sincere value to that. I mean, once you're called Dahmer in college, you can't attach a value to what you're called. But I guess what I'm saying is like it. If there are people who value their name more than me, then that I can respect, but I wouldn't be able to relate because I personally have never attached that much value to my name.
No, I get it. And when Mike made the big leagues, lots of people were, is it Messina or Musina?
Mhm.
And we were always like, whatever, it's close.
Mm.
And so we didn't. And they're like, well, I used to say to people, we say Messina, but I know like theatrically Musina seems to have a better ring to it. And like the broadcasters like to say it that way.
Yeah.
But in general, it's the same.
I would tell Laney she's so much more than a name. She's a pumping heart. She's a soul. She's an individual who has valued opinions. I don't think your name.
Hold on.
I don't think your name stops you from identifying as any of those things.
Can I backtrack?
Go
She
ahead.
has opinions. I'm not sure they're valued opinions,
Okay.
but she has opinions.
All right. No, it's a different way of looking at it. Is how much do you attach your name to who you are as a person, and I think that could play a very significant part into how you feel about it.
Yeah, I would think that there is. I can't imagine. I'm trying to think how big the biggest public schools are.
Mhm.
That there would be so many that you can't do it on a case by case basis and know the kids. And because one of the kids that the article was about, I actually know one of the teachers, and I said, this is what the kid says they go by, and the teacher said, that's all I've ever called her, and that's all I hear all the kids call her. And they said, what happens in the other classes I can't speak for, but throughout, like that's all anyone calls this kid. So I think if those are the situations, and just say, yeah, just whatever.
I think if I was running a school, I would totally be on board with that. I'm not to the point where I would throw somebody under the bus because they aren't doing that, is what I'm saying.
I would.
Okay.
I will throw.
All right. You're a bus.
Just
You're a
be
bus
nice.
thrower.
No,
You're not
just be
throwing
nice.
people
If
under the bus.
if someone wants to call them, like then just do it. Whatever. Be nice. Just have them fill out the card and make sure you have to
I
look
agree
at the
with
card because you'd have to look at it when it says Blockhead Everett. Oh, Mark filled out Jeff's card for him, and then you would have to double check those to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But just fill out the card. You can do whatever you want.
I do think high schools should consider the card. I think they should consider letting them.
Is that what they did when you, or don't you remember?
I was so oblivious. I cannot express to you how oblivious I was as a human being from like 17 to 19. Like nothing mattered.
Okay.
I don't remember the process. I don't even remember like caps and gowns and things like that's how I was so far gone at that point in my like growing process.
I remember that sheet of paper literally passed around and
You wrote
it down because that's how we found out some kids were like a junior or some kid was the third. And, the kids that wanted to be read as so-and-so the third.
Yeah.
And, in class, you had no idea.
Yeah.
So it probably didn't even show up on the roster. So, yeah, and it's one of the things too, I think in life that people sometimes get afraid of. Well, if we do this, it could open a whole can of worms. And you're like, I really don't see what that can of worms would be. And I doubt it would open it anyway.
Yeah.
So, there are examples where I'm trying to think of a good example. Like your first kid turns 16, you buy him a new car. Well, you're opening a can of worms because every other kid after that's going to want a new car when they're 16.
That's true.
But, with this, like, this is what the kid goes by. This is what the kid wants read at graduation. And I will say, if you still haven't read the article, which you shouldn't, you should be listening to us. Go read it when
you should go read Ashley Little's article on
NorthcentralPA.com. When we're done. But you should listen to us first. But if these kids who have gone by these names, they knew they weren't fighting for anything different on the diploma. They weren't trying to change the law.
Mm-hmm.
All they were saying is at our graduation, just read our name the way we want it read.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to me like a simple
request. Not read the name the way they want it read. Read the name they want read, just to clarify. You made it seem as if they were going to mispronounce
the name I want you to read.
Well, I'm just saying, you made it sound as if they're going to mispronounce it.
No, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Laney, I don't even think it's a matter of value. It's just as simple as that's not my name. It would be like if someone kept calling you Jeff and Mark. I mean, that's just a different, like, I just don't care. Like, I've never, and maybe part of it is because like Jeff is such a simple name, but like my name has been butchered. Jeffrey, you would be amazed at how often Jeffrey gets butchered
because it's one of the most basic names in America.
Butchered. But I have had the G given many times, and it's just not like I've never corrected my name on a sheet of paper that was incorrect.
Well, see,
not at Starbucks, not at a bowling alley, not like nowhere.
And the examples of those that she just gave. Yeah, it still says Jeff. If someone's reading it,
names, correct.
It would still sound like Jeff and Mark, and we would be like,
we're talking about right. It'd be like if someone called us Sally and Greg, and we were like, wait a second, that's not our name. So I do understand that there is a value to your name and recognize your name. I've just never been in a situation where I attached a value. I don't think I was worse of a bowler because the person who took my shoe.
It would be fascinating. The divorced to poll 50 divorced women who had been married for a significant amount of time that was like their name and that was their identity.
Yeah.
And then to say, like, did you keep the married name and why? Or did you go back to your married name and why? And how important was it to you? And what were the determining factors? And that would be fascinating because I'm sure that there are people who are like, this is who I am now, even though I'm no longer married. And then there are people who are like, I hate that SOB and I don't want to acknowledge it.
But I think the point, like Laney brought this up and you just kind of hinted at it again, is it really comes down to like how much do you attach it to identity? Because you even said right there, like how much you identify with your ex-husband. And that, like, I really just think it comes down to like, how does the name, is it 10%? Is it 90%? Like how much does your name affect your daily identity, your personal reflection of yourself? And I think it varies for everybody. I think everybody has a different value of it. If you had a high value of it, you would be miserable because people calling you Mike Messina your whole life. So you almost like you had to have a lower value of your name being your identity. You had to. There's no way you would have made it if you didn't.
Yeah,
it would bother you way more if you walked around and your identity was like, my name is really what makes me, and it identifies me. And I mean, you would have went nuts just from people referring to you as your brother.
Little siblings with the same name, with the same starting initial.
Right.
That is true. I guess maybe because I'm not there are lots of people, boys and girls, who've gone through this, going through school.
But it makes sense to me. It makes sense as an outsider because when we talked about the Leah Thomas story, I had said to you about how there's this whole aspect to it that I cannot relate to, where the journey has to be so personal and egocentric. Like it just has to, because you're trying to figure out who you are. And so I think in this case, I think dead naming is an issue for more than just that community. But I think in this case, at this school for that community, I think it would make sense to me that the name matters more for them because they are on a personal journey of trying to basically self-identify who they are as a person. And so the name would perhaps help them make that identification or at least get them on the right path. Again, as an outsider, like I can't relate to that, but I can understand why their percentage of the value of their name would be higher than it would be for me or for you.
Let me ask you this, as I was just reading Spring's next comment. Okay. What are your thoughts on women who don't take their husband's last name when they get married?
It's so funny. So I'm not going through this right now, but my girlfriend loves to pick on me that she is not going to take my last name. Her reason is because she has a diploma and 2 degrees.
Okay.
So on her thing, it says all her letters, Hannah Bauer.
Okay.
And so she has made fun of me that I waited too long to propose to her because now all of her things say Bauer. And so she does not want to change her last name if we get married.
Do you care?
It's not so much that I care. I joke with her all the time. I'm like, listen, I don't have a lot of value and I don't have a lot to give you. And my last name is supposed to be one of those things and you won't even let me give you that. So I do joke with her. Listen, at the end of the day, it wouldn't change whether or not I would decide to marry her. But like, certainly I would say to her, if I had the choice, I would like you to take my last name, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to change how I feel about everything else.
I have a friend who just got married, later in life. And all she talked about is the hassle of going through all and changing stuff with her last name. So yeah, I get that. Especially, once you become a medical doctor, you're not allowed to change your name, are you? Aren't there times that you can't?
I don't know about can or can't. I just know that it's very difficult. The process of getting it changed on your license and your degrees is incredibly difficult, from my understanding.
No, I do.
That's why most in that field do not change their name.
Other than the aspect of having kids, and then the kids have the same last name as mom and dad, which is kind of typical. But other than that, yeah, I get the whole. And again, this is maybe why I'm liberal. Like, if I totally understand why women don't want to take the last name of their husband because I can't name a billion, but I can name 3 right off the top of my head who didn't. And
the reason that I wouldn't get upset at her is because I wouldn't want to do it. So how could I get upset at her for something that I personally would not be thrilled about doing?
Because it's tradition.
What's that?
Tradition.
To what? For the man to change his name to the girl?
For the woman.
Right, but see, I might feel differently if it was the other way. Yeah, if it was tradition.
And when I said that, for whatever reason, all I could hear was Fiddler on the Roof.
That makes sense. That is all you can think of when you hear the word tradition. Before we have to go today, thank you guys for the comments. Before we have to go today, Whiplash. It's one of my favorite.
Let's end it with a lighter
note. Whiplash. It is one of my favorite movies. I don't think I've ever told. If I had to sit down and really make the list, I would probably put Whiplash in my top 25, top 20. If I really had to sit down and figure it out.
I think it's great. One of the stupid things about it that I love, and I know this is corny, is I love in movies the subtle aspects that I can only imagine when the person wrote it.
Okay.
They're like, this is a good example being, have you seen Rocky? I know we've discussed this.
I've seen the whole movie, just never in consecutive pieces.
Favorite part of Rocky is when he gets up and they're trying to stop the fight and he won't stop the fight, and they're standing and they ring the bell and he waves Apollo on at him and his face is all mangled and Apollo just kind of shit. And there's no dialogue. He just waves him. My favorite part of Hunger Games is when she finds after Rue dies, and when she finds the camera and there's no dialogue with that. And I love the closing scene of Whiplash because it says so much and so much happens during the song, but there's nothing really spoken.
Right.
And you can see it and you can hear it and you can feel it and no one says anything.
So that was a great lead up to what I was going to ask you. To me, I think the movie shows that the conductor is not wrong. I think it's 50-50. Some people watch it and you think like, boy, he proved him wrong. And I think it's the opposite. I think the drummer proved the conductor right. That in order to I see the like really, you don't think that at all.
I think he was a horrible human being.
Well, listen,
And
there's
I
a
think
difference.
that- I
Hold
think
on,
the kid
hold
won.
on. See, this is what's like so weird to me. This is it's not black and white. You can
It
be a
is.
horrible no. You can be a horrible human being and have a belief or a thought that is right. So, for example, he is a horrible human being. I would never let my kid go play drums for him.
Okay.
However, I think what ends up happening is he is right that in order to become like the best, not good, not great, not really, really good or really, really great, to be the best, you have to be pushed to a place that nobody else wants to push you to. Because in order to do that, you have to be an awful human being.
Disagree.
And that is what is happening in that final scene. What do you think is happening in the final scene?
This is what because now I think it gives statements like that give the parents that abuse their kids and drive them to extreme with this desire of I'm trying to make them better.
Time out
Like
real
did
quick? Can I
Michael
get a 30?
Jordan?
Hold on. Can I get a 30?
Did Michael Jordan have an abusive coach?
Can I get a 30?
Sure.
Michael Jackson, Tiger Woods. It's not like we don't have examples of yes, they weren't necessarily fantastic parents, but
No, they weren't.
but it also they prove the point that in order for somebody to be the greatest, they have to be driven to a place where most will not drive them to.
So was Tom Brady abused? Was Taylor Swift abused?
But you can't disassociate the two. So you're struggling to disassociate.
There are examples, but like Michael Jackson was like there was a time and place, but Michael Jackson was obviously a world-class talent.
Uh-huh.
That there's a reason why Michael became the star and Jermaine didn't, and Jermaine was treated the same way Michael was. So there are so many.
Why does it bother you to disassociate the two? Like, why do you like you had mentioned, like, I guess that's what makes me liberal. There's a feeling of you right now that you don't want to believe that the two can be true because then it says that those people could possibly be right. Like to admit that Tiger Woods' father or Michael Jackson's father might have been 5% right irks you. You refuse to disassociate the two.
Because
did I explain that? Was that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, I think you said it well. I'm just trying to think of the intelligent way to respond. I don't think that you need to be abused to reach greatness.
I agree with that.
And this guy in Whiplash basically believed that you need to be abused to reach greatness. You need to throw a symbol at whose symbol? The bird?
I would take it one step
Charlie
further.
Parker?
I would say not to reach greatness, but to be the greatest is his point. You can be great in the moment. You can be great for a generation, but to be the greatest, someone has to take you to a place that no one else is willing to take you.
And that's why I don't know if, I think I think Jordan and Jerry Rice and Tom Brady.
You know what they all have in common?
I think.
Do you know what they all had in common?
What's that?
They all played team sports. Where the being labeled the greatest wasn't just determined by them, but by a group of people as well. The examples I gave you are individuals who could not be affected by the success or the results of people working with them.
Okay. So then you want to talk about someone like Hulk Hogan. No, I don't know. I do not think it. I think at the end.
That's what I want to know is what do you think is actually happening then at the end?
This is what I think happened at the end.
Okay.
I think there came that the kid stood up to the bully. He outsmarted the bully. And I think that that they ended with a mutual respect.
Okay.
That the because this guy had always been the teacher, and when you're the teacher, you can, figuratively pound on the kids, and you get like, you're in charge and they're not, and you're in charge and they're not. And he kept like beating on this kid figuratively, and the kid wouldn't quit. He wouldn't quit. And then at the end, the kid's like, you're not in charge now. I'm in charge.
Yes.
And I think there was a mutual respect of that.
But here's the irony to that is he's the best he's ever been. And as he's playing,
was he?
Oh, you don't think that's the best he's ever played? That's the whole point of it. The whole point of it is like it suckers you into this, like, look at him, he made it, he got through it, like he survived. But what people miss is, yes, he did all of those things, but he's also the best drum player he could possibly be in that moment. And that is because of what that conductor has done, for better and for worse.
Well, I think, see, to me, the moment isn't how well he played. It's that he won. He outsmarted him because he was conducting the band.
That's the
point. He was conducting the band at this moment when the conductor, he's like, no, I'm in charge, and they'll play when I tell them to play.
But that's the point, is he? Because remember, when they meet at the jazz place and the conductor's telling him the story, his whole point is like, in order to get to where you have to be, someone has to take you somewhere you're not. And
that was his belief.
And at the end of the movie, it's not like the conductor is upset at him. Like the conductor is like finally going along with it because he knows he has gotten him.
No, see, I don't think he's upset with him because I think he said, I'm not saying I think he kind of tipped his hat. Okay, touche.
I'm not saying I'm right, but rewatch it with that in mind now and just tell me what you think.
I will say this. I never thought of it that way. And it is an interesting take. And I'm not saying you're wrong. That's not how I thought of it. But it's also why it's a great movie.
It's fantastic.
If you don't like the closing scene in that movie, it would be to me like not liking the closing scene in La La Land. And
liking the closing scene in Good Will Hunting.
In Good Will Hunting, yes, which you are stupid. And what's funny is our late friend, our dear friend Jerry, did not like the end of La La Land, and we loved it. And he was like, it was dumb.
Yeah.
And we used to go back. We're like, how do you not like it? And he was like, because I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And
I will say this:
I thought it was brilliant.
On rewatches, it's a little slower every time you watch it. And there are lulls where when I rewatch it now, I'm kind of like this is not as delightful as I remember it being. I will say that. The first viewing is the one that's going to matter the most to you, where that is not always the case for great movies. Great movies usually, they don't always have to get better over time, but they age well. La La Land for me has not aged great. Every time I watch it, it's a little slower, and I'm a little more kind of like, what are we doing? I'm trying.
I probably.
And this is coming from someone who I really, really liked it. Like, really enjoyed it.
Maybe you watch it too often.
Maybe.
You know, a movie that never slows down for me?
Dumb and Dumber.
Hot Tub Time Machine.
I knew you were trying to do it.
I like the guess. That was a good guess.
Thank you. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news. Again, to read the story that we talked about today about dead naming, you can find the article on NorthcentralPa.com. Shout out to our content manager Ashley Little, who did a really nice job on it. We will be back tomorrow. Maybe you have to go to something tomorrow.
I have a thing tomorrow, but we might be able to work it in tomorrow. But then the world has slowed down a little. Slow. Yeah. Or slown. Kind of like flown.
They're just words. They're just words.
I had most of the letters, right?
Just pick the words and say whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina.
Tonight.
We'll see you guys tomorrow.
No. Hockey prediction for tonight.
No one cares.